Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Creating You Together. Thank you for joining. So last week, Helen and John over on the JTB community were offering a discussion about healing our hearts emotionally. And Zoom, the system, was so excited about this that it had a total connection and fainted. So we're going to be hosting this topic here today. And before we get going, who we have joining us today are Clara. She is a documentary maker and writer. She's joining us all the way from Taiwan.
Yep.
We have David. He's from Queensland, Australia, whose state is still not talking to my state, doesn't want anything to do with us. But he is a practitioner and teacher of Chinese medicine. We have Caroline joining us from New Zealand. She teaches meditation. We have Karen joining us from Hong Kong, and she's editor-in-chief of Where My Heart Leads. We also have Haresh from beautiful sunny Bali, where the weather is always just beautiful, and he is a mentor. We also have, as usual, Sonia, and we have Orla in the background practicing her Harry Potter invisibility skills. She will keep an eye on your comments. So please feel free to share your perspectives, your comments, whatever it may be. It may be a piece that is a piece to someone's puzzle. So feel free to share, especially if it's very different to what any of us may be talking about. But before we get going, how about we'll just take a few moments, as usual, just to calm our farms, to close our eyes, and just take a few moments to breathe, connect with ourselves, our hearts, our intuition, our guidance spirit. And as we come into balance, we see the energy radiate out, sharing it around the whole world together for those that may be interested in some balance and harmony as well. So if you are all good, we will get going. How is that?
It's really nice. I can feel my heart beat slower. I can feel a bit calmer in my heart. So today's topic is healing our hearts emotionally. And I'm just going to start with Clara first. So what do you think or feel about this topic? Do you think we need to heal our hearts, or what's your take?
I think it is very good to Anita for guiding, or leading the discussion by the connection exercise, because I have no idea what the topic is about. But when I'm doing the exercise, I just feel that when I connect it to my heart, I can feel it and I know what to say. Because I always regard the heart is very important. So if our body can connect it to a heart, we know things happening. So if you ask me what it is healing our heart, I don't know. But I would say our heart will let us know, is there anything we need to heal? Yeah, I don't know. Is that all right for the other people?
I think it's a great question. So as our heart really needs healing. And also I absolutely agree that when Anita do the guided meditation, I also feel it's clearer. So Caroline, what about you? What do you feel?
I feel that the heart is a pretty perfect in itself, and I feel that emotions and our mind can get in the way. So I know from myself, there's times when you can be feeling really in your in your balance. For me, I get my balance from being out in nature and walking, and that feeling of that balance is quite beautiful. And then if something happens, your emotions can be triggered. And I think for me, I feel the heart is, well, it can be like a chicken and the egg question. But for myself, I feel that the heart is perfect in itself. It's just perhaps the emotions and the mind that have things they're working on. So as you move through and get clarity with yourself about a situation, you bring more balance into yourself and feel more confident, and you're not upset or in your mind. So for me, I think it's almost like an undoing. The heart is perfect in its own right.
Thank you. I agree with you. So just wondering, now I want to hear from a gentleman. David, what do you feel?
Well, we could be talking here till December, till Christmas on this subject. So where do you start? My background being a particular interest in Chinese medical philosophy. The heart holds a supreme role in Chinese medicine. The understanding that it's the minister, it's the emperor. So it holds this role of being in charge of the entire body. Furthermore, each organ, each one of the primary organs is associated with a specific emotion. So traditionally, heart, the emotion is joy, which is a curious thing to compare that, say, with the liver, which is anger. So we have the liver being associated with what many consider to be a negative emotion, and then the heart associated with a positive one. So, but we all have, we have heart disease, we have heart issues. So ideally, as Carolyn said, the heart's a perfect organ, but we have problems with it. And so I think if we sort of try and understand a little more closely, if there is something that's an emotion that's aligned with the heart and is pathological, because joy obviously isn't, unless it's false joy, which would be mania, then we'd be looking at the emotion of shame. The heart is somewhat like the connection to divinity. And in ancient China, that was the Tao. So they say the heart is the minister of the monarch. And so it's the minister of the Tao. So the pathological emotion that I understand is shame. It's one of the deepest emotions, if not the deepest, that humans have. And it severs our relationship with divinity, which is pretty much what I think the story of Adam and Eve is all about, where we have a fall, a personal fall from our relationship with divinity.
So
shame,
Sorry, David.
Shame's the big one for all of us to deal with.
So do you feel that our hearts are, as we've been talking in the previous weeks, connected to our intuition, our knowing, our higher self, spirit, whatever term you would call it? And is it, as you were, Caroline and David, you were saying, is it our emotions that are tripping us up and getting in the way of having that connection and that harmony and balance? How does everyone feel about it? Anyone think something completely different? Love to hear it.
Karen, Haresh, any comments? So, go ahead, Haresh.
Well, I agree with some of what's been said so far. And in my experience, when people get hurt, they tend to withdraw emotionally. Judgments can get in the way mentally as well. and different aspects of it. So I feel the heart feels things deeply. I don't feel it needs healing, but what happens is when something really affects us and moves us to a point of wanting to close off, we build a barrier around our heart. And as we put on more barriers, we stop connecting heart to heart. And at that point, I feel other than love and kindness, there's no way to, that's the way to, for the heart to open again. Otherwise, everything else is a band-aid. In my own experience, I've closed off emotionally many times when I felt hurt. And then not wanted to connect heart to heart with people. When I was a kid, I remember I used to get into arguments. And then I used to ask myself, why can people be so hurtful? And then gradually I closed off and I didn't really want to connect heart to heart with people. It's taken several years for me to then open up again and start connecting heart to heart again. And that's thanks to my wife and the love and acceptance in our relationship. Meeting people like Helen, Tony, John, others. But, they've had a significant impact. So to me, we build walls around our heart. And the only way to bring those down is to allow the love and acceptance in. And that can only happen through a connection, some way or the other. The divine connection, our connection with people we care about, that's what I feel.
What about Karen?
I really agree with what Haresh just said. Like, it's more that, like, because of things that happen to us, that we kind of close and, like, build our walls, and that the connection with the divine or somebody like that could potentially help you open the heart, and with an open heart, like, perhaps there would be less emotional and mental triggers, because, like, that heart is so open and so, stable or whatever, like, you recognize that emotion, or you recognize the repeat, like, mental patterns. Oh, that guy is, like, such an ass or whatever. Like, you recognize that pattern and you don't, like, feel that pattern more and more. So it's like, yeah, that how can we reopen or, like, break down those barriers, I feel is quite key, I think, to a lot of people to kind of eliminate or clear out a lot of the judgments we have with each other, or, like, prejudices we have.
Thank you, Karen. We have comments from Amanda. So I'm reminded of what Helen says, to love with the mind and think with the heart. So what's everybody feel about that?
I think that line is, like, awesome, because when you're at that state, you really don't have that emotion, like, those emotional buzzes. And I feel sometimes I feel like I can be in that state-ish, but, it's so easy to kind of get trapped into that repeat pattern again.
I personally like this stage because, like you said, sometimes I ask, like, if I got so emotional. Sometimes I just been triggered and I got really, like, angry. So how at that point I can, like, don't take it personally, and how I can open my heart, especially I'm in the middle of anger. So that actually helps me to kind of, okay, take a deep breath. So what about the others?
For me,
Helen? Go ahead, Clara.
Okay, for me, I just find that if I was in the emotional stage, if I can aware of that and keep quiet for a moment, so things will go smoothly. Otherwise, if I'm not aware of my emotion, I would just argue, or and then you trigger more and more emotions, and it broke out. So the first thing is to aware. So you keep, looking within yourself. I think it helps.
I agree that, like, not saying not verbalizing the anger is important, like, is one step, but I feel like the other person can sense your anger, like, even if we don't verbalize it. So I think that's the first step, but it's then, like, how can we, there's something else, I feel.
So especially if they're in harmony and balance, they'll probably be a lot more sensitive and aware of that anger, as if you're both emotional.
So at least one person keep quiet first. I think it is. Yeah.
Caroline, are you saying something?
Oh, yes. Breathing exercises can be, I find for myself, can be really good. And square breath, Helen's square breath, I find is really amazing. So where you're breathing in and it feels like it brings the mind, the emotions, you just feel more grounded after you've done a couple of rounds of square breath. And I think a breathing exercise can really work well to bring that balance and harmony within. So when you do communicate, you're communicating more from being yourself and not allowing the emotion or the anger to set you up for something bigger, maybe.
Yes. So Glinda said, rather than think that the heart needs healing, is it not the case that our personality needs integrating and we need to open our heart? So what's your take? Do we really...
Haresh, I agree that our personality needs integrating, but I think as that happens, it's important to see it as simply as possible. Otherwise, it gets very tricky sometimes. Like, if you have an emotional pattern, like Karen mentioned earlier, you can, if you're getting angry at someone at that point, you're not going to think my personality needs integrating. Yes, it does, but you got to deal with the situation, and until those walls start to melt away, so you can connect more and more with your heart. It goes hand in hand. So how Caroline mentioned the breathing's helpful. Someone else mentioned, I think it was Clara, that the breathing's helpful. I think journaling's helpful as well, because we have so many thoughts and they build up on each other and sometimes can erupt. But if we journal as well, it kind of helps us put our thoughts on paper. So it kind of clears those layers, so it makes it easier for us to see as well as to what's really going on inside.
Marianne said, if I'm feeling emotional, I find lying on the grass helps center me. Then I go into my heart and feel more in balance. I quite like this. I like this exercise to put my feet on the grass. I feel like it calms me. What about you, David? What do you normally do when you feel you're being triggered, if you're being triggered?
My perspective on emotions, first I'd just say that I think by and large we're collectively phobic of emotion, and I think that is a bit sad. My little metaphor is that I see emotions as being somewhat like the dashboard on your car when you're driving. It's giving you feedback about aspects of yourself that you'd otherwise may not be conscious of. And I think we need, one of the things that we're most phobic about is anger. And yet it can be an extremely positive emotion if it's used constructively. We tend to grow up seeing the destructive side of emotion. I grew up in a house of violence. I grew up in the 60s, 70s, seeing, movies where, you'd see an old movie and a couple would be having an argument and the woman would become hysterical. And once she received a good slap, she would suddenly come to her senses. So we've been programmed to see the negative expressions of anger and become phobic of them. And so, a lot of the comments I'm hearing is, I meditate or I breathe and try and make it go away. But I think one of the teachings of John is to accept. And, otherwise we're sort of believing maybe that there's some, God stuffed up and gave us something that we shouldn't have and shouldn't feel. And I just don't believe that. I think we need to alter our relationship with emotions, and that each one is trying to communicate a need, and that we, that in Chinese medicine, it's the heart that acknowledges that.
Mm-hmm. So do you feel at that point then that if we're centered in our hearts, that there's a difference between feelings and emotions, whereas feelings may connected to our intuition and our knowing, where we would go deeper and look into what is happening and why. Why are we being triggered? What is this all about? Whereas emotions may be that reaction of grrr.
For me, each emotion's wanting something from us. So anger wants change. Anger corresponds to the liver, and it's described in ancient Chinese medical text as being like a military strategist. So we have to kind of get clear on what it is that I want to change and then direct the anger towards that. None of us here would be where we are if we didn't get frustrated and angry with our circumstances and desire change.
Yes,
so we
I
can
agree with
Google. So we can go to Google, or we can go to our intuition.
we can go to Google, or I would, well, after the previous one, I would go to my intuition. Elaine said it's beyond self-control. It just is. Yeah, it's the self-acceptance. And we also have a comment from, Doris. I agree with David. And also we also have a comment from Mary. I was about to say Amanda, it keeps popping. So anger for me often means that I need to set a boundary. Yes.
Yeah.
So
anger tends to want change. Sorrow is telling us about something that's missing. It's often things that were missing in our childhood that need healing. Fear wants security. It needs, it's that, and that's the sort of way, that I encourage clients to work with their emotions, to accept them, to feel them, and that when we do that, then the heart is back in better shape and able to use intuition and access higher knowledge and understanding.
So healing our hearts then is it healing our hearts emotionally? Is there, like someone said before, there's a chicken and an egg circumstance? Could there be, or is it possible that there are some illusions out in the world that, our hearts need healing? Like Caroline, you mentioned that, and David, that our hearts are fine. It's us possibly that's other stuff that's getting in the way, or is it the other way around? How does everybody feel?
I feel this topic is so big that, like David said at the beginning, that we can talk until the end of the year and we still wouldn't find the answer. So I feel, personally, I feel it's a great topic to explore further. I don't know what about the others.
Well, one thing that has occurred in the field of psychoneuroimmunology, which is the study of emotions' effect on our physiology, is that there is no time lapse between an emotion and a physical effect. So they happen at the same time. So there isn't necessarily a beginning and a cause and an effect. They're happening at the same time, which is a little bit hard to get your mind around, or it certainly was for me.
Yes. Clara, what do you feel?
I just want to look at this as question from other aspect. I just find that when we look at or what we have talked say about emotions quite seemed negatively, but in fact it has created an opportunity for us to connect to our heart, and then to see within ourselves and to change the perspective and change the scene. So of course it is after so many years of training. But ordinary people, maybe they just let the emotion blow out. But I find that in fact emotions give us an opportunity to learn and to know more about ourselves. It is a very good transformative process.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we've got another question. How can we heal our hearts with emotion? Is it the other way around? So on that fantastic question, if someone would like to respond, if not, we may leave it for, go for it, Karen.
So I feel like perhaps heart in its kind of fullest, most open is like love with a capital L, and capital L love is not an emotion. So I don't know if that kind of relates to Elaine's question, that you don't, yeah, it's not an emotion that heals it. I feel like it's some
Well,
type
I
of
think this is
love.
an excellent question from Elaine and a brilliant topic that we can continue through the chat. We will wrap this up for now. Please feel free to share your thoughts, opinions, comments, and we can continue this through the chat. It's a fascinating topic. Next week on the Monday the 7th, Helen and will be talking about connecting to our guides and spiritual guides and teachers. Next Monday on the JTB Community YouTube channel. The information will be on the Facebook page as well. Thank you all for joining. We will be back again in 2 weeks' time and look forward to seeing your comments and continuing this very big topic. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.